It's been a while, and I'm sorry. I missed you guys. Life's been super crazy. I went back and got married again, thanks COVID, as well as we started home renovations on our house, so everything's been a little bit nuts. And then to top it all off, of course, we got 2 new patches that I haven't even really talked about. So today what I want to do is I want to talk about the Indy patch release that was about a week ago at this point. It's got some really great stuff in it, but it's also missing the mark on a couple of areas. So let's dive in and talk about it a little bit. Now, the Indy patch was released, I think last Tuesday. We've been able to play with things for about a week now. And while it's still a little early to talk about some of these things because we really haven't seen a lot of the new ships out, I think that there's some easy takeaways and just some stuff that I've seen in the last week that really bear mentioning. So let's talk about this in a little bit different way than normal. What I want to do is break it down into 4 different categories. We've got the new ships, we've got new PvE content, we've got the exploration update, and then we've got some just general balance and industry tweaks, I'll say. Now, for each of these, I'm going to give it a scale of 1 to 5, 1 being basically I think it completely broke the game and we're never going to be able to recover. 5 being that it's just absolutely stand out and now makes Eve Echoes my favorite game of all time. So starting here with the first of those 4 areas that I mentioned, the new ships. And this again is one that I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time talking about. I think that they're really cool and they have a lot of unique benefits that I think will help a lot of people who are indie players and miners, but we haven't really seen them yet. And I think that I saw the first Orca on the market for like 20 bill. I'm going to expect that price to come down a good bit, but there are going to be some changes associated with that. If you guys want to see a breakdown of specific ships, I highly recommend going over to Captain Benzi's channel. I'm sure that he will, if he has not already, put out a number of videos about that. So in terms of the new ships, I don't want to pass judgment too soon because again, we haven't really seen these out in the wild yet. But just looking at this, I think that this is probably going to be a 3 or a 4 at least. I'm actually going to give this a 4. I think that some of the abilities that these ships are going to have are really going to be game changers when it comes to building the bigger and bigger ships. And I'm going to talk about that in just a minute. But for now, I think this is going to be a 4. I think this is a pretty good change. Now, moving on to the PvE updates, really this kind of focuses on tweaking and blending both the traditional ratting and the mining aspect of Eve Echoes. This comes in the form of the capital query anomalies, where you have to go in, you have to fight a bunch of caps and mining ships and things like that. You can get some great debris out of them, and then your miners are able to come in and actually start mining the compressed ore, which is obviously very valuable. Now, the other side of this is the pirate barges that are going to be spawning. We did see a couple of these go through, and they seem fun. You know, they're basically coveters that you're going and blowing up with mining drones or combat ships, whatever. They do have a lot of good loot that drops. Again, it's just a nice way to kind of spice things up. With that being said, I think that these are good, but I think they will get old kind of quickly. It's kind of like the rally anoms. Once people figure out how to do them, it'll be a pretty kind of laissez-faire type of relationship. Oh, look, we can go get some good ticks. We can go get some, you know, good compressed ore, but it's not really going to be exciting. You know, I think we've already kind of seen that in the last week that we figured out how to run these. Here's what we do. We, you know, sino in or whatever it is. We take care of these and the miners come in and clean up. That being said, I don't think it's a bad thing. I'm going to give this one a 3 on the rating scale because it is, again, I think a really fun way to incorporate the 2 aspects of the game and make people really start coordinating more and more. Next, let's talk about the exploration updates. And on first glance, I was really excited about this because if you look at what the patch notes say, they're increasing by 33%, and then they're also adding a new type of site that will only be available in -0.8 through -1.0 systems. Now, that sounds great, and if you bundle that with the fact that we are taking the interceptors basically out of play in some cases because you now need to have an Explorer or Sisters of Eve ship to be able to unlock those best sites, I thought this was going to be a really good update, and I still do in a lot of cases. I think the interceptor removal in and of itself is reason to celebrate because, again, it gives you a reason to fly something other than an interceptor. But when you actually look at this, and I spent about 2 hours going through Delve, Fountain, and period basis, hitting all of the those high tier or low tier, I guess, systems. I was really a little underwhelmed, and I kind of had to think about it and realize that if you go through 100 systems and only one of them has a data site, if you increase that by 33%, you're only increasing it to 1.13. So yeah, maybe my math isn't quite right there. Maybe it is a little bit different. Maybe you get 2 sites out of it, but still, like it just, I hit 97 systems. I did not find a single data site or relic site. I found a number of compressed dead spaces or whatever they're called. While the Sisters of Eve ships and the Explorers are great and they're fun to fly and all that, because again, they're not an interceptor, it requires a little bit something different, I still feel like this is just not a great exploration experience. And so I'm not going to skill out of it at this point, but I do think that it's a little bit harder for people to justify doing exploration. So overall, I'm going to give the exploration update a 3, because while the addition of the higher level sites and the requirement to basically fly a Sister of Eve or an Explorer ship is great, it also does kind of negate the ability for lower tier players to fly those ships and get those best rewards, and the spawn rate really isn't that much of a game changer in my opinion. That being said, I do think that exploration can be really fun if they had added a mini game, or if they had, done something else to make it a little bit more of a game rather than just, random chance rolling the dice when you find these sites. I think it could have been a really cool update, and I'm hoping that in the future they do continue to increase the rewards and the interaction, I'll say the experience for exploration. The fourth area that was really changed as part of this patch was the basically the mechanics around how asteroid belts operate, and that was that they were given more or as part of their reserves, they were able to get better spawn rates. The difference between the spawns was narrowed a little bit. I think basically that just means that you have a -1 system versus a -0.1 system. The difference between those two is not going to be quite as huge, I guess. So I think that was kind of nice. It'll make it so that there's a little bit more parity amongst corporations that own those different systems. But I think that overall this is going to be one that I'm really not a fan of. And this kind of gets into what I was referring to earlier when I was talking about some of those ships and how it's nice that they're going to have some really good bonuses. But I think overall what's going to basically happen is we are going to see mineral prices drop over time. But increasing the spawn rate, increasing the number of compressed belts, increasing with the quarry anomalies, all of this stuff, I think ultimately is going to hurt the ore market and the mineral market. Don't think that this is going to happen tomorrow. I don't think that this is a short-term thing. In fact, if anything, you may actually see mineral prices go up in the short term because you're trying to build new capitals, whether they're the industry caps or carriers and dreads. You're going to see a lot of miners kind of shifting around the way that they operate. And I think that that's going to be a short-term kind of pop, if you will, in those mineral prices because you're seeing an increase in demand. However, once we really get into these, probably in maybe a month or two, I think that there's going to be a little bit of a deflation in those mineral prices because we're going to have a lot more supply and the ability to get these minerals in a lot faster ways, whereas you're not going to have as much of a sink for some of these minerals. I was talking to some of our Indy guys. It sounds like in order to build a capital right now, the mineral cost is only about 20%, 20 to 30% of that total cost. Most of that is just straight ISK. And so if you think about it, if there's no change to that, which is what happened here, we didn't see any adjustment to the amount of ISK required or the amount of minerals required to build some of these big ships. Eventually, you're going to end up with a situation where you have a lot of minerals, but you don't have a ton of demand. You have to go out and be getting more ISK, right? So I do think that this is going to hurt the game in the long term. I'm going to give this one a 2. I'm not a huge fan of it. I think that if they had maybe kept the size of the belts, maybe increased the spawn rate a little bit, because we are going to be mining them faster, but you're not letting people just sit in one belt and just mine it and get twice as much ore with all of these other bonuses and everything else that's going on with the mining burst foreman and some of those things. I think that it would have been a little bit different story. But that's kind of my thoughts on this. What do you guys think of the patch so far? Be sure to leave a comment down below and let's have a little bit of dialogue. And as always, of course, like, and if you haven't already, subscribe to the video. And until next time, remember, kill marks last forever, and fly safe. Have a good one, y'all.